All right, what's going on, everybody? Good morning. There's an old saying that people have used over the years when they talk about a lot of different topics, and this gonna just tell you what this saying is. It's when there's smoke, there's fire, and definitely in regards to Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Sport, as of late, there seems to be a little bit of smoke out there. Right now, the question remains: is there fire after that smoke, right? This situation is starting to remind me a little bit of the UFC and Dana White because now, you're having multiple fighters come out and they're complaining about Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Sport, complaining about the money they've made or they're currently making, right? And also just complaining about their treatment in general, right? You had Lawrence Okolie as of late uh, comparing Eddie Hearn to a slave master. You even had Eddie Hearn's dad back in the day when he was present. He was representing Matchroom Sport in Eddie Hearn's absence in that press conference with Dillian White back in the day. I think it was for the Dillian White Oscar Rivas fight, excuse me, if I'm not mistaken. And he said, yeah, back in the day, promoters, you know, we treated fighters like we were the slave masters and they were the slaves. He goes, and that is no longer true. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he did use the word slave masters when he was comparing, um, you know, promotional relationships and promotional deals with fighters, right? To even use that word was, he got a lot of slack for using it. So you have to ask yourself, is there, a degree of elitism from Barry Hearn and Eddie Hearn? They talk a good game, but behind the scenes or deep down inside, do they have this mentality that, these are just the fighters, we're the brains behind the operation. So, they work for us, we don't work for them. I know Eddie Hearn has, you know, changed that theory. He loves to come out and say that I work for the fighter, blah 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 blah. But does he really mean that? You have to ask yourself that, because a lot of times when people say things like when Barry Hearn said what he said, you have to ask yourself, did he have that mentality, and does he still have that mentality? But you know, is he trying to project something otherwise, right? So you know, you have to look at that back in the day, or promoters were the slave masters, and now things have changed. Well, have they really changed? Right? By saying what you said at that particular time, it leads me to believe, or it leads me to at least question: did you yourself, because you were an old school promoter, did you have that mentality? Did you exploit fighters back in the day because you knew you can get away with it? Now it's becoming a lot harder to do that, right? Fighters are getting smarter. They have better representation. They seem to have more leverage now because there's more competition. There's more and more people out there who are involved in the sport of boxing. There's more broadcasters out there. There's more promoters. So now the promoters can't just, when there was only a few out there, right? Promoters were able to kind of leverage themselves over the fighters because it's just like the UFC. It's like, where else could those fighters go? Right. So they have to take what's given to them. But now fighters have options, as we've seen with Lawrence Okolie. He's going to leave Eddie Hearn and he's going to go with Boxer. So Boxer's a new emerging promoter over in the UK. Before it was just Frank Warren and it was Eddie Hearn. Now you have Boxer emerging, and they have that big alignment with Sky Sports. So the reason why I'm actually making this video is because Derek Chisora made an interesting comment, right? And the first thing he really talked about, obviously he thanked God, whatever, but in regards to his relationship with Eddie Hearn and stuff, one of the first things that came out of his mouth was, Eddie, you got to stop paying me now. Right? You got to stop paying me now. I'm eating fish and chips. I want to eat caviar. You can see Eddie had a kind of an embarrassed look on his face, right? It was like, wow, this guy's calling me out live, put me on the spot, blah, blah, blah. He looked embarrassed, right? He really had no response. He goes, oh, sheepishly patted him on the back and said, oh, we've taken care of you. We've taken care of you. We've taken care of you. Whatever, right? And Derek Chisora wasn't buying it. He kept saying it. Oh, you got to pay me. You got to pay me. It's not the first time he said that, right? Dillian White's come out and complained about pay, right? He turned down 2 championship fights with Anthony Joshua because he wasn't happy with the pay. It's another guy who complained about pay. Liam Smith came out and he was critical of Eddie Hearn as well, too. It's like this guy threw me to the wolves, right? Basically implying that he was mistreated over there, right? So, that's something you got to look at, right? And Demetrius Andrade, he left because he was never given the big fights either, right? Devin Haney had to leave to get his big fight because he never would have gotten the undisputed fight with Eddie Hearn. Because again, Eddie Hearn loves to say these guys are freezing me out, but he's the guy who's always creating these roadblocks, right? He's the guy who's always creating these the friction with the other promoters, making it hard for these fights to get made with the other promoters, right? And even Joe Makowski from DAZN was like saying, I wish this guy would stop beefing with other promoters because it's causing a problem. And everyone loves to say that, okay, well, DAZN's giving him all this money, this $1 billion, $200 million a year, whatever. But once again, the way this works is you don't just get the money up front. He's just not handed that $200 million every year and he can just do what he wants with it. No, they still have to buy each individual fight, in other words. So that the way that $200 million is dispersed throughout the course of the year is at DAZN's discretion. So they're still buying the fight. So if DAZN doesn't want to buy the rights to a particular fight, they're not gonna do it, right? And they're constantly being outbid. It seems now they're not gonna be able to show this Joshua-Usyk fight. They weren't able to show Canelo versus Caleb Plant for the undisputed. They weren't able to show the Devin Haney fight. Tasha Jonas is another fighter that left. So there just seems to be like a pattern now. Lawrence Okoli, he's leaving after his last fight with Eddie Hearn. He's unhappy as well. So you have to ask yourself, even with Dillian White, when he was supposed to fight Joshua the first time, and I guess he was offered like $4 million, and then they bumped it up to $5 million or something like that. But reportedly, Big Baby Miller was offered $7 million, right? And then Andy Ruiz ended up getting $5 million, so the same amount that Dillian White was offered. So like, why was Big Baby Miller given more money than Dillian White? So it's funny. It seems like Eddie Hearn will pay Joshua, he'll pay Canelo, but he won't pay his other fighters. Who else over there is really making big bucks? Now, Devin Haney did get paid pretty well over there, but once again, that was DAZN's decision. They felt that Devin Haney was a good investment, so they're the guys who are paying for each individual fights. So you have to ask yourself: is it really Eddie Hearn? Is it DAZN? Well, does Eddie Hearn put himself in this situation, right, where DAZN is picking and choosing, what fights they want to pay for the rights to? So it's always going to fall on Eddie Hearn, in my opinion, because he was the guy that chose to go with DAZN, and he actually froze Sky Sports out. Drew, what's your opinion on this? What did you think of Derek Chisora's comments after the fight yesterday? And is this much to do about nothing, or is there something brewing here behind the scenes?
It is something brewing, because when you could have made fighters more money in certain situations, like Andre, you could have made him a hell of a lot more money. You could have got him the big fights. You could have got him fights with Canelo, but because you wanted to Canelo wanted to tell you, I don't want to fight Andre and everything. You didn't want to be the promoter. You said, hey, we signed this agreement, but you do got to fight the guys that I pick and the zone picks and everything. You have to have some leniency and everything. And he also couldn't get the fights for certain people. Like Sokoli, he couldn't get him a Breeders fight, a unification fight. And that's something he's been asking for. He's been asking for Makabu, Breeders, and Eddie Hearn could not even get him those fights. So I can understand why those two were going to leave. One's left, one's about to leave. Now, Dillian White, yeah, he only got like $5 million the first Anthony Joshua fight. And when you give a guy that's not proven like Big Baby Miller more money because you want to hype up this AJ's American debut and everything, and wound up him testing positive for steroids, and you gave Andy Ruiz a step-in $5 million, and he's not even a DAZN fighter; he's a PBC fighter at that. It gives you a lot of questions on what the hell is Eddie Hearn doing? Is he playing favorites? Obviously, he is playing favorites to Canelo, and AJ, but you have so many up and coming good fighters on this stable, and a lot of the cards that he's been putting out are like lackluster a little bit. Like the cards that are at his house, his mansion, those cards were terrible. And like there's just a lot of cards on the zone recently that have been bad. And like Kulev versus Chisora, that could have gave Chisora a little bit more money than he averagely does because he's a top 10 heavyweight.
Yeah. Well, there's some people saying, well, these guys are getting paid well. Again, getting paid well to you is different than getting paid well to them. If someone is, again, if you're getting paid $500,000 to do $1 million job, if the market value for a job is $1 million and you're getting paid $500,000, you can't turn around because you're not making $500,000 and say, well, guys making like a lot of money to us is not a lot of money to these guys based upon how long they've been in the sport, the fights that they're fighting, and what other fighters are getting in comparison to them. So if Devin Haney is getting paid more over at Top Rank to fight for an undisputed title because Eddie Hearn and DAZN can't deliver, if Canelo Alvarez is getting a $40 million guarantee, right? $40 million guarantee to fight Caleb Plant, right? Plus pay-per-view back-end money, right? And DAZN can't give him that, then again, you can sit there and say whatever you want about, oh, well, they're getting paid well. Getting paid well in comparison to what? Into what you think is being paid well. And then you hear these words, these phrases, these sentences being said, oh, well, fighters are getting overpaid. There's no such thing as overpaying a fighter. Now, maybe a broadcaster overspends if he projects a certain amount of profit and it doesn't come to fruition. If a broadcaster makes an error in judgment, that's on them. But a fighter never gets overpaid. He gets paid whatever a broadcaster or a promoter is willing to pay him. So if a fighter is able to negotiate a certain purse for himself or a certain deal, then he's not the one getting overpaid. It's the person who's paying him that is overspending, right? There's no such thing as being overpaid because the deal you take, or excuse me, the deal you make is the deal you take. So you should never say, like when you hear promoters and even fans, oh, well, this guy's being overpaid. There's no such thing as being overpaid because it's either the person who's paying you can afford what they're paying you or they can't afford what they're paying you. And if they miscalculate on a projection, then that's their mistake. It's not the fighter's mistake. So you can't sit there and say, oh, well, this guy's getting overpaid. There's no such thing as being overpaid. Now, are these oil companies being overpaid right now? No. No, we're being price gouged right now, right? So we have no choice but to pay what these gas prices are. Can we do anything about it? No. So we're not. They're not over. We're overspending right now, right? We're overspending because that's what the market value dictates. So whatever the market value dictates, whatever figure it dictates, and the fighter grabs that figure, he's not being overpaid. It's the broadcaster that's overspending. And then if you want to sit there and say, well, Wilder should have took that DAZN deal, really? Because let me ask you this: the Canelo deal that ended up not working out because midway in the middle of that midway in that deal, they wanted to renegotiate it, right? They wanted to change the terms. They were questioning opponents. They were telling him, you got to do this, you got to do that, and that potential Wilder deal with DAZN, right? They said that Wilder had to guarantee that he would fight Joshua, but Joshua did not have to guarantee that he would fight Wilder. So even with him signing that deal, Joshua still had the right to say, no, I'm not going to fight him, because he was on a fight to fight with DAZN. He wasn't signed to DAZN at that time, so he could have refused it. And then Joshua ultimately lost to Ruiz. So then you had the rematch, and then Wilder would have had to wait. So again, hindsight is 2020 here. They restructured the Canelo deal. They restructured the Golovkin deal, right? So originally, what DAZN offered Canelo changed, because didn't he? I guess they're saying he got like 17 million for Bivol or something like that. He didn't get the 40 that he got for Caleb Plant. So he actually made more money with PBC than he did with DAZN for a particular fight, because again, that the way the money is dispersed is at DAZN's discretion. So he got paid a lot more for an easier fight, right? Than he with PBC than he did with DAZN. So you have to ask yourself, where did he make out better, with DAZN or with PBC? All right. So at the end of the day, I just think DAZN, a lot of the moves they've made just seem illogical to me. So is it anything I'm saying off base there? What do you think?
Like, I think like ever since like Eddie Hearn did take over DAZN's marketing a little bit, like if you call it like that, they in some bad moves.
Well, the thing is this. I mean, according to Eddie, he advises DAZN, like he has an advisory position with DAZN. But at the end of the day, someone created a fucking spam account. We have to block this guy. Boom. There we go. All right. Yes. So even though he has a advisory role, they still have the final say on what's going on here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
but it does look like they take a lot of input from Eddie.
Yeah, they do.
So, but they like, I thought the Triple G deal was a bad deal for them to invest that much into it, and then the fights that he's been doing on that contract, and banking on, hey, we're gonna get a trilogy fight. We promise you take this fight, you take this contract, we'll promise you a trilogy fight. And they kept the promise. They gave him the trilogy fight, but the fights that he's been taking are terrible. Like, I thought he lost the Derevchenko fight.
Yeah.
I did the rescore on Chile with Chicano. I thought he lost that fight 116, 111.
Yeah, I had him losing that fight too. I thought he lost that fight.
Murata, it made money in Japan because Murata was a big star in Japan, but what did it do for the American public and from the overseas public in like the UK and everything? Didn't really do that much. But and then like the guy that was gonna fight Charlo that Triple G fought and stopped. It just wasn't a good like lineup of fights that put him on that contract. Like, if you're gonna pay these guys big money, you got to at least put them in big fights with guys and on your income, because you're not going to make no money. You're going to lose money. Like look like Frank, like Frank Warner, when he spent 41 million on the Tyson Fury and Dillian White fight. That's not a $41 million fight. That's maybe a $25 million fight in the UK, but that's not a $41 million fight. That thing flopped. The United States. You probably didn't even get 50,000 pay-per-view buys in the United States for that fight. And if you probably pay Dillian White a couple more million, you would have probably had credibility still. But that was really a waste, because you wanted to outbid Eddie Hearn, because you think Eddie Hearn was gonna bid like 30 million. He wasn't gonna bid $30 million on that fight.
Well, once again, you know, if it's the zone is the guy, is the entity that's funneling Eddie Hearn the money. So once again, you know, everyone's like, oh well, Eddie's got the biggest war chest. He's got the $1 billion. He gets the 200 million a year. Blah 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 blah. But once again, the zone still has the right of refusal for these fights. They make the decision whether or not they're going to buy the rights to the fight, right? And it's quite possible that maybe they did bid more for this Joshua Usyk fight. They did bid more than Sky. It's quite possible that that could be the case. But again, you know, the Saudis had the final say, and Sky is now going to get this fight. So it's amazing to me that the zone would sign this long-term deal with Joshua and not be able to have this fight, because this is arguably the biggest fight out there right now for Joshua. And just to assume that Fury is going to fight the winner, right? Being a top-ranked fighter. Then they're talking about Deontay Wilder, who's a PBC guy, right? So if Derek Chisora ends up fighting Deontay Wilder, I can guarantee you this: Matchroom's not going to is not going to be the promoter of that fight. There's just no way. There's just no way. PBC is already outbid. PBC outbid Eddie Hearn. Top Rank outbid Eddie Hearn. So again, he has this war chest, but it's up to DAZN to disperse this money to him, right? They're the ones that buy the fights, right? So what good is having all this money if you're not getting the big fights? You're not, even Joshua, he's never ever delivered Joshua that big fight. He couldn't deliver him the Wilder fight, couldn't deliver him the Fury fight, right? And you can sit there and say, oh, well, Joshua's got a better resume than this guy. Better. Again, like I said before, this is not the heavyweight division of the 70s. It's not the heavyweight division of the 90s, right? He's got some solid names on his resume. But again, in my opinion, Fury's two biggest wins are much better wins to me than Joshua's two biggest wins, right? Joshua never won when he was the under. Like Fury won when he wasn't supposed to win. Joshua lost when he was supposed to win twice. So Fury's overexceeded expectations. Joshua has not, in my opinion. And again, this is just my opinion, right?
I'll be honest with you, I agree with you on it. And it's a shame when you have UK fans saying that, oh, you know, Fury, like hating on Fury and everything. But if you're right, if you want to compare resumes, Fury's best two wins are better than Joshua's best two wins, even though they share one guy that they both win that you could count as a best win. But Fury beat like the most good puncher in boxing at that point.
You know what's funny? When you hear Eddie Hearn try to big up Joshua's resume, right? He'll rail it off, and he'll talk about Povetkin. He'll mention it, and again, Povetkin's a solid fighter. Don't get me wrong, but you know, he was an old man when he fought Joshua, and he was never like an elite guy. He lost to Klitschko. He was never that guy. He was a good fighter. I'm not going to diminish that. He was a good fighter, but he was never that guy. Then he says Ruiz. Once again, Ruiz was a very inconsistent guy. Oh, he throws him in there as one of the great wins. Again, these are good wins. They're not great wins. He's never had a great win. Even when he fought Klitschko, he was a favorite against Klitschko because that was the Klitschko who was off 2 years, coming off a loss, and who was older. So he's never had he's had some good wins. He's never had a great win. Fury's had great wins, right? He's had great wins.
The thing that they put on it. Oh, he beat Vladimir Klitschko. He got off from almost getting knocked out. But you almost got knocked out by Klitschko that was on his way out.
Exactly. Exactly. And then you look at the even the Povetkin fight, he was rocked in that fight.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say something that's very unpopular. It's not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything, neither here nor there. I had Povetkin winning before he got stopped. I thought, you know, I just think Joshua is a good fighter, but is he really as good as Hearn is trying to tell us? I don't know, man. I just don't know. And everyone's talking about, well, you know, Joshua fought the wrong fight. He's got to do this, that, and the third. But I'm not the first guy to say this. And Mike Montero, you know, I had conversations with him. He said this, that Joshua was never the same after that Klitschko fight. You could see there was a gradual change in Joshua. It reminded me to the Klitschko, you know, when Klitschko, after he got knocked out a couple of times, he was having some stamina issues, and he changed his style up a little bit. He started fighting, you know, a more methodical, slower pace, a little bit more cautious. And we've seen Joshua do this. Like, he fought cautious against Ruiz. He fought cautious against Pulev for a while. He got hit a few times in there. He fought cautious, you know, against Joseph Parker. He was having some problems against Takam when Takam got inside. So we've seen this gradual change in Joshua, you know, happening before our very eyes. So it wasn't just like all of a sudden he fought the wrong fight against Usyk. He was doing this gradually, fight after fight after that Klitschko fight. And he did try to become more aggressive in that Usyk fight last time. In rounds, you know, you saw in round 5, 6, 7, and 8, he started picking up the pace. He started trying to take it to Usyk. But once again, Usyk made that adjustment, and he actually did better in the last 4 rounds than he did in the first 4 rounds. So in other words, when Joshua started becoming more aggressive, Usyk had more success in those last 4 rounds because of the fact that Joshua was more aggressive. So this notion that Joshua just has to be more aggressive in this rematch and he's going to do better. No, the evidence showed us that when he was more aggressive in the last 4 rounds, he actually did worse.
He almost got knocked out.
He almost got knocked out when he was more aggressive. Am I wrong?
He caught let me start in the last round of that fight. They were right in the middle of the ring. He was more aggressive. And what happened? He got caught by a nice right hook by Usyk, and he put him to the ropes. And
I'm glad you said that, Drew, because the story of the fight, and I hate using that phrase, the story of the fight, because that's a Max Kellerman thing, and I hate using it because I think he overuses it and he uses it improperly. But the story of the fight in the first 4 rounds was what Usyk was doing was he was setting up the left hand with the jab. And one thing that I noticed that he did with the jab was he was changing the level of the jab. So in other words, he would throw it to Joshua's head, then he would drop it down to the chest. And in doing that, he was getting Joshua to, you know, divert his vision up and downward. And as he did that, so when he threw the jab to the chest, he caused Joshua to kind of look downward a little bit and take his eyes off of Usyk, and he was almost masquerading that left hand, right? So by changing levels of the jab, he was causing Joshua to move his hands around and change the line of vision and take his eyes off of Usyk, right? And when he did that, he was able to sneak the left hand down the pike because he was camouflaging. Usyk was doing a good job camouflaging that left hand, right? But in rounds 9, 10, 11, and 12, what Usyk started doing was instead of throwing that left hand off the jab, he was throwing the right hook, like you said. And that right hook was a punch that Joshua wasn't prepared for. He wasn't used to seeing it. So Usyk was jabbing, but he also was stepping in, right, closer to Joshua and not trying to measure him with the left hand from the outside. He started stepping in closer and got deeper in the pocket. and he was cranking up that left hook off the jab, right? And then he was throwing the left hand to the body and not the head. And then he was pivoting out to his right, right? He was pivoting out to his right and sliding back and resetting. So he was changing up the attack patterns a little bit in the last 4 rounds of the fight, and Joshua couldn't adapt to it because he was starting to get hurt. So, that's just how I saw it, and I think that it's going to be interesting that everyone thinks that Joshua just has to be more aggressive, and that's going to be better for him. But as we both agreed upon, when he was more aggressive, when he did try to step it up, it was worse for him because he started getting hurt.
I'm going to tell you the one thing that Robert Garcia is going to do for Joshua. And there's only one thing that he's going to do that's going to, for Joshua. He's going to be able to make him disguise his right hand more with the jab. So many things going to be able to let him do. Other than that, Joshua's going to be the same Joshua in this fight. And that's why I think Usyk going to stop Joshua in 10 rounds in this rematch. It's just going to be more of Usyk's going to adjust. Usyk's going to be more confusing. Going to try to confuse him on his offensive game a little bit. He's going to catch him, and it's going to be over. Once he catches him with that left hook or that right hook out of nowhere, it's when it's over. That's when he goes to the ropes. Usyk goes and starts railing on him, and that's when the ref's going to stop it.
The two big questions that were asked before the first fight, and they were asked and answered, in my opinion, were what happens if Usyk gets hit with a good shot by Joshua? Will he be able to take it? That was question number one. That was answered. Question number two was, can Usyk hurt Joshua if he lands clean? And that was answered because he buckled him, staggered him. It wasn't like Joshua got buzzed. He was visibly hurt.
Yeah.
He was wobbled and buckled and he staggered. And after the fight, he turns his back and walks to the ropes and drapes his arms over the ropes and puts his head down. And that told it all to me. Like that, he was like, he gave me the the indication that he was basically saying, I just went through a fucking war with this guy.
And you know what's crazy? And I said this to people. 217 to 220 pounds is the perfect weight for Alexander Usyk as a heavyweight. He was 217 for this fight. Like, this was the perfect weight for Usyk to be at in heavyweight because he was comfortable there. Like, you can just show Usyk has a chin because he took the best shots of Joshua and he still stayed in front of him and boxed him.
Yeah. It's crazy. Right now, Usyk is a minus 215 and Joshua is a plus 175. So it's a pretty close fight. It's a pretty close fight right now. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I think that Usyk may be able to stop Joshua in this fight this time around.
I predict it's going to happen.
So I'm curious to see what the odds for. Let me see if I can find some bets here.
Like, I'm willing to bet the knockout.
I'm gonna see what the odds are for the knockout. I'm curious to see, man. Oh, this is an old one right here. I'm trying to find the Usyk Joshua 2 props. I'm dying to see what the knockout prop is for this fight. If I can find it. Yeah.
Joe, I gotta bounce, okay?
Yeah, all right, man. I'll catch up with you, brother.
All right.
Be good. Yeah, so I'm curious. I may be tempted here if the odds are good enough here. Let me see. I'm gonna try to. I have my my betting app that I use. I want to see what the odds are for the knockout. I'm gonna check my site, see what I can get here. because I may bet this this knockout prop. I'm considering betting this knockout prop. I'm gonna check right now. Let's see if we can get it here. If we get the boxing odds here. All right, let's see what the odds are here. Got some. Okay. Look at this ridiculous Amanda Serrano versus Brenda Carbajal. Amanda Serrano is a minus 3,300. Like how the fuck can I get excited about that fight, bro? Why did she not take that rematch with fucking? It's ridiculous how Serrano did not take that rematch with Katie Taylor. Like I just don't understand it. I don't know what the thought process behind that was. Jake Paul and Hasim Rahman Jr. Jake Paul is a minus 210. Oh, on my website, Usyk is a minus 200. Joshua is a minus 160. So Ruiz is a minus 300. Wow, Baumgartner is a plus 200. Let me see if I can get some props here, man. Is there any props? Let me see if there's any props for this Joshua fight. They may not have them. They may not have them just yet. Let me see. Boxing. Yeah, I don't think you have. I'm not sure if they have any props here. Let me see. Yeah, I don't see any props yet for the fight. Do not see any props. But I'm curious to see what the odds are for the decision, for the knockout. Yeah, it's crazy. Yep. Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall. Marshall's a minus 110. Clarissa Shields is a minus 120. So that's virtually a pick'em fight. Right now, I'm using Bet Online US, Bet Online AG. That's what I'm looking at right now. That's what I'm looking at right now. That's what I use right now. Yep. Yeah, so this whole thing with Eddie Hearn, man, I mean, he's basically trying to lead everyone to believe that the grass is greener on his side of the fence, but it is what it is. Yeah, Ryan, that's crazy. Ryan says, I don't understand how Usyk had such a tough fight against Breedis. I don't understand how he had a tough fight against fucking Chisora either. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, it really is. All right, guys, that's about all I have today. I will check you guys out later on the Ringside Reporter podcast at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure you check us out 6 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. And catch you guys later, man. Have a great one.